Welcome back to the Outdoor Kitchen Show. Today we're at Breck's beautiful Baton Rouge Zoo to talk about conservation and World Oceans Day, a day of environmental awareness for the oceans. Even the zoo's aquarium of native Louisiana fish and reptiles has been affected by environmental disasters, so we're just wanting to spread the word. You can even enter a sweepstakes called The Rhythm of Conservation, offered by the partnership of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums and K-12, with a grand prize of a Disney vacation. Now, Sean is a K-12 kid at Louisiana Virtual Charter Academy, and he's got some questions about conservation and World Oceans Day for Jennifer Shields, the zoo's youth educator.
How does World Oceans Day work?
Well, World Oceans Day is celebrated at a lot of different zoos and aquariums around the country, and since we have an aquarium here at our zoo, we celebrate it here. And we have giveaways, we have informational stuff to give to kids and to adults so that everybody realizes that we all play a part in the conservation of our oceans. Even though we don't live right on the coast, I'm not a fisherman, so I don't make my living in the ocean, but what happens here affects what happens there, and what happens in the ocean affects you and I. Did you know most of the oxygen you're breathing right now is produced in the ocean?
No,
so if we're polluting the ocean, we're polluting our own air. So again, everything we do affects the ocean. There's a good thing to keep in mind. Everybody lives downstream. So what somebody does upstream from you affects you. What you do here affects somebody or some animal downstream. So we need to do things like limit the use of pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers in our garden. We need to make sure that we throw away trash in the proper place, because you've been driving along the road, you've seen trash on the side of the road, right? Mm-hmm. What happens when it rains? Where does that trash go?
It goes into the ocean.
That's right. It goes into streams. The streams go into the Mississippi River, head straight to the ocean, and that stuff doesn't go away. And floating out in the ocean, there's huge areas that are covered with trash that we have just carelessly thrown away. And animals out in the ocean get tangled in it, or maybe they swallow it and it kills them. Sea turtles, good example. Have you ever seen people releasing balloons? Looks really pretty, right? They release helium balloons up into the sky to celebrate something. And don't they look pretty floating in the air? Well, they can float for miles and miles and miles. Land in the water. Sea turtle sees that, thinks it's a jellyfish. Sea turtles eat jellyfish. That thing bobbing along looks just like a jellyfish bobbing on the surface of the water. Sea turtle eats it, blocks up their system, and it can kill them. So everything that we do here affects the ocean, and everything that happens in the ocean affects us.
So we gotta recycle the stuff that we drink or eat, or
absolutely
recycle newspapers.
Recycle as much as you can, and what you can't recycle, make sure you dispose of properly.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, and we can all do that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Now let's go inside the aquarium. Miss Jennifer is going to show us how they feed Bella, their stingray.
Come on, girlie. There you go. Now she sees it. Now her mouth is on the underside, so she actually has to come up over my hand.
Oh. Spin like a torpedo.
You missed it, sweetie.
Like a torpedo. Hey, I'm not the shrimp.
Come here. You missed it. Oh, don't be mad. You're the one that missed it. Bella, come here.
Stop doing that.
Come here. There you go. Right there. There you go. Good girl. Was that good? And she just sucks it down whole, and then she'll chew it a little bit. Oh, that was good taste. See, now she's sitting down there at the bottom and she's chewing. You see her head kind of bobbing up and down in the water? All right, you ready for another one? Let's try one more. Come here, Bella.
So let's eat those. The catfish.
There you go. Good girl.
So what does the alligator gar eat?
They'll eat some of the small fish.
Since this is the Outdoor Kitchen Show, Miss Jennifer is going to show us what the animals eat in the aquarium.
Well, the first thing we have is shrimp, and we feed these to some of our larger fish, to our stingray, even to the turtles, and sometimes the alligators get those too. We have some smaller smelts. Those are for the sort of medium-sized fish, and some of the larger ones. And we'll even occasionally cut these up for some of the really small fish. We have mealworms. We feed both mealworms and crickets, and the insects go to pretty much everything in the aquarium, just about. We'll eat the crickets and the mealworms. But particularly some of our turtles really like the mealworms. And then we have catfish chow, which not only several of our species of fish, but also our carnivorous turtles will eat that. And then the last one, this is probably familiar to a lot of people that have aquariums at home, it's just flake fish food. So a lot of our smaller fish will feed on that.
Can people pet the stingray?
Actually, we don't allow that. And there's a couple of reasons. It's a stingray, and she does have her stinger. So obviously that could be dangerous. But the other reason is that things on our hands could actually make her sick. You noticed I was wearing gloves when I was feeding her. And it's not because I don't like icky shrimp goo on my fingers. It's actually because if I had any germs on my hands, stick my hands in the water, now the germs are in the water and they could make the fish sick. So that's why we don't want people to stick their hands in the water, because they could actually pollute the water that the fish are living in.
There were some big fish here, and what happened to them?
Well, with some of our fish, we get them when they're fairly small, and when they get larger, we actually take them back out to where we collected them, the exact spot where we collected them, and we release them. So it's sort of like a head starting program. We get them when they're small, when they're vulnerable. They stay here, they get fed up, and then we send them back home when they're bigger and they're less likely to be killed by other larger fish. We periodically go out and actually collect fish for the aquarium, and so we restock it as we need it. And unfortunately, the areas where we used to get the larger fish, like the tarpon, we can't go into right now because we had several hurricanes, and then we had, of course, the oil spill in the Gulf. So the areas where we used to collect some of those large fish to display are now off limits because they're trying to get them to repopulate, because the fish population was devastated by those events. So scientists are actually watching the populations of those fish to make sure that they're stable before we're allowed to go out and collect them. So periodically you'll see fish come and go in some of our exhibits, and it's just sort of based on what's available that we can have on exhibit. Well, some of the fish that we have here are actually fish that fishermen are more than happy for us to take out of the water, the ones that are not considered game fish or anything that anybody's going to want to eat. But they're still important to the ecosystem, like the Gulf toadfish. And it's called a toadfish because the male actually makes toad-like sounds when underwater when he's calling to the female. And the male is actually the one that takes care of the eggs and the babies once they hatch. So we have reproduced them here. There's a really high mortality rate both in the wild and in a tank like this. In the wild, it's mostly because everybody eats them. They're small, they're easy to snack on. We had to figure out how to feed them properly because they eat such tiny little plankton out in the wild, so we had to figure out ways to feed thousands of more mouths, tiny little mouths. But this is one of those fish that, not exactly a pretty face, but really an interesting story and a great species to have on exhibit. All of the fish here in the aquarium and all of the other animals in the aquarium, our reptiles and our amphibians, are all native to Louisiana. Now the really fun thing about this guy is when he gets impatient to be fed, he spits at the keepers. He takes mouthfuls of water and he spits it at them to tell them to hurry up and feed him.
Right where he is.
There you go.
Look at it. Feeding frenzy.
He's getting little shredded pieces of shrimp. There you can see a little piece of shrimp. He missed one. He'll snack on that later. And then you can see when he's jumping around like that, he's probably spitting a couple of times at the keepers.
That's funny.
He has very rude table manners. So if you look really closely, you'll see something that looks like a worm in the turtle's mouth. That's actually a projection of his tongue, and it's a lure that he uses to lure fish in. So the keepers know when he opens his mouth and he's wiggling his tongue, that means he's hungry. So the only time they feed him is when he goes into that feeding response. If he's just sitting on the bottom with his mouth closed, or if he's got his head up, or he's swimming around, they know he's not hungry. The only time that they feed him is when he says, "Hey, I'm hungry," by opening his mouth and wiggling the tongue. So it's a very passive hunting style. They basically wait for a fish to get fooled by that and think it's a worm, swim right into his mouth, snap, and he's got a snack.
Now, while we're watching the snapping turtle eat his lunch, we'd like to ask our fellow Cajuns a little favor. Snapping turtle numbers are really on the decline right now, and it would help a lot if we wouldn't trap them for just a little while. For more information about Louisiana fish and reptiles, come to the aquarium at the Baton Rouge Zoo. If you come on World Oceans Day on June 8th, you'll get extra entries in the Rhythm of Conservation sweepstakes, and the zoo is doing lots of giveaways too. For more information, you can visit our website. Now make sure you stay tuned because we'll have more from the zoo when we come back to the Outdoor Kitchen Show.